4:15, let's go ahead and get started. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come. I'm hoping we can be out by 5:30 or maybe before, depending on the amount of discussion. It's not a really packed agenda. I do feel the need to make some introductions, even though we've been here before. We have some alternates with us tonight. Those of you who weren't with the group last year, Brian Smith is representing now for sure the first group, year group 2 of our classified staff there. And Amy has officially switched from 2 to 1. Amy was with us all year last year. Roy Swope is visiting with us. He's the alternate for nutrition services. So thank you for being here, Roy. And I think that's all of our new ones. Jamie, did we?
Yeah,
I think last time we introduced you. So that's everybody. So everybody who is important is here. Thank you very much. All right. On the agenda, sent this out. Hopefully everybody got it. I did try not to color code anything. I've learned that lesson now. On the meet and confer recap, also I did an agenda, and then I also did a kind of gave some detail to it too. I don't know if you printed that out or not. Basically, the meet and confer was 3 items. The 260 calendar, which was accepted as presented, and during the meet and confer process, will go to the board. It's been in front of the board once, and we'll go again. I believe the actual date to approve is the November board meeting, because you have to give a certain amount of time notice because of our school starting date. So that was one item at the meet and confer. The other one was the 9-month calendar, the teacher calendar, and that was approved as recommended by this group, and I have no reason to believe that it won't be accepted by the board as is as well. And then the wording to put alongside or along with the 9-month calendar that we talked about, if time was necessary, if time was taken because of the intruder training or active shooter training from a teacher work day, that those staff members would get that time back during one of the building PD days. So that's pretty much the synopsis of that. Does anybody have any questions, concerns? Is that what everybody's remembering? I do want to address one mini item with that. I don't know how many times I looked at this 260-day calendar, hundreds it seems like. On the high school graduations at the bottom, my understanding is that those rotate, and I put down Benton, Lafayette Central in that order. My understanding is that's the order for this year, for May of 18, but this is the 18-19 calendar, so those would need to be shuffled. Is that correct?
So it'll be
Not graduations?
Yeah.
They'll need to be, yeah.
Lafayette's is at 1.
Central go to the first, and Benton and Lafayette.
Central's always first or last now because of the setup. So
Okay.
if we're, next year, I think we're 7 o'clock for 18, so 19, we'd be 1 o'clock.
Okay, so my question to the group is this something that we need to take back through the whole meet and confer process, or can this just be done by the board when we say, hey, there's a mistake to this? Does anybody feel like this needs to be renegotiated?
No.
Okay.
Re-meet and confer.
Re-meet and conferred. Yeah. Re-meeted and conferred.
Re-conferred.
Okay, so we will adjust that so that Central is first, and then Benton, and then Lafayette, but everything else will remain the same. Okay. All right.
Is that, it's going to be Central, Benton, and then Lafayette?
Yeah, that's what
Yes.
it goes
Okay.
from the bottom to the top.
Okay.
Unless you have
I was at all of them last year, but I honestly don't remember the order
Dr.
in which we
Kraus,
did them.
on the 260 workday calendar, would this be an appropriate time for me to bring up my question that I had emailed to you?
I was going to make additions to the agenda here in just a moment.
Gotcha.
So let's do that now while we're thinking of it. Had 2 people requested some additions to the agenda. One of them deals with the 260 work calendar. So I thought we would just slide that in. Like I said, I don't anticipate we're going to run out of time today. We'll slide that in after extra duty for sped teachers. And then there also was on the agenda last time, something we didn't get to that Melissa had brought up, dealing with the employee handbook sign-off, correct, Melissa?
Yes.
And so we'll just put that after 260 calendar, if everybody's okay with those additions to the agenda.
Employee handbook what?
Sign-off,
The second page.
sign-off page. Anyone have concerns about adding those two items? Now's the time to speak. Excellent. The next item is membership representative reorganization. That's a fancy way of telling you what I just told you, that Brian is now not the alternate, he's the rep, and Amy has switched groups. And I think we're set until the next person decides to leave, retire, or do whatever.
Do the both of them, those employee groups, have to now hold an election for their?
Yeah, I was saving that for later because I didn't want to scare them off. If you guys can get a hold of, well, first of all, do both of you have access to the entire list of your group? Okay. If you would please ask if anybody wants to serve in the alternate role. If there are more than one, would you have just an election and then come up with an alternate for both groups? And then we would be fully staffed, so to speak. We have had times before where no one volunteered, and if no one does, that's okay, we'll just go without an alternate. But if we can get one, it would be better. All right, early retirement stipend notice. That refers to board policy GCPC. And the wording of that policy says in part, the district may offer an early notification of retirement incentive of $1,000 to employees who have been in a certificated position for a minimum of 6 years directly preceding notice of retirement. My understanding is that historically, the board every year has voted to do that. I don't know if it's even really in our vote to do so, but I guess I just wanted to discuss it and get a consensus from the group whether you would want to recommend to the board, yes, I think you should do that. No, I don't think you should do that. Okay. That obviously, like it says, it is a board decision, but I thought it would be good to discuss here. And I had spoken with the mini board about this, and I think that if I misspeak for you, just let me know.
I'll let you know.
Okay. I think their thought is, you know, definitely if the levy passes, we want to continue to do that. If it doesn't, then we would want to look at the overall financial situation and say, last year there were 28 people who signed up, so that's $28,000. So the thought would be post-election, is that something that we want to spend that money toward, or are we going to need it for a different item?
To keep a staff member.
Right. I mean, that's a classified staff member.
Of course we do, for one more year we do.
No ulterior motive.
No ulterior motive.
Yeah. General thoughts, what do you guys think? What should be our recommendation?
Our recommendation, I believe, should be yes. Let's continue this practice with the understanding that many things may have to change if there is no new revenue source.
I think to take it away this year for people retiring who maybe have already kind of planned on that. I mean, because if people are retiring, they probably have been thinking about it for a while. So I agree. I don't know that we want to say now, boom, no, but we would have to look at it.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying for people who are retiring in May of 18, yes, we would, but then look at it for future.
That's what I would think would be the best way to do.
No, classified staff, currently you're not eligible for this. You have thoughts one way or the other?
We should continue if at all possible. That's the revenue.
I was gonna say, I'm with what Eric said. I mean, we may have to make a lot of changes. It may mean somebody's job for everybody to be happy with $1,000 after, if the levy is passed.
Okay. I'm not hearing any contrary
Keep going.
opinions. Paul, did you have something to say?
I can't imagine anyone would want that to go away.
Okay. I'm not hearing any contrary opinions, so I think what we will take to the board, and I guess I'm assuming, do we have the Dr. Newhart, do you know, is this on the agenda for the next meeting?
It's not on the agenda for the 23rd, it is for the 13th.
13th, okay. And that will be post-election, obviously, so they would,
It is beneficial from a human resource standpoint to receive early notification for who's leaving the district and who's retiring.
yeah, from our perspective, not only is it a nice bonus, if you will, for the employee, but it gives us the opportunity to get started on positions we know are going to be open.
And that might be even more beneficial if the levy doesn't pass, to know the potential openings or not rehiring, those types of things. But we fully intend to battle to make sure this levy gets passed. It's important, people. And that needs to be communicated. If you're not, then people have the wrong mindset towards it.
Okay, so that will be our recommendation to the board, and whether the full board makes a different decision, obviously that's their prerogative. I want to skip the one that says preliminary discussion for about 30 seconds, because open membership slots, that's the two we talked about, the needed alternates for these two groups, that's all that dealt with. So then going back to preliminary discussion of possible additional costs. Those of you who were part of the group last year are very familiar, probably to the point of being sick to your stomach, of working on this document. But we spent a lot of time working on this, and I felt like, I mean, just bottom line, I felt like this was probably the most beneficial thing that we did in terms of helping people to develop a global perspective on what the budget means for SJSD. The reason I included it here, two things. Number one, the election is going to be extremely important in one direction or another. If it passes, it's going to allow us to work over a period of years back to a balanced budget. It's not going to happen overnight, but will allow us to do that. If it doesn't pass, then we're going to have to do some significant. There's no kind way to say it. We're going to have to look at some significant cuts, potentially up to 6%, which could be anywhere in the $7 to $8 million range. Wes, is that accurate? So while last year we put together a list of things that totaled, around 10, 11 million of additional wants, we would be forced to look at the reverse of that, of how are we going to trim $6, $7, $8 million off of the budget. Last year's activity was a lot more fun than hopefully what potentially we could be looking at. So the reason I gave this to you is just to kind of set the stage for, starting in November, we're going to be doing some heavy lifting again. It's either going to be fun heavy lifting or it's going to be excruciatingly painful heavy lifting. So just keep this for your information. Now, the things that were on there for last year, if levy passes, that doesn't mean, hey, we have to do any or all of these. This is just a starting point. We'll take things off, add new things, modify as need be. But I just wanted to put this out in front of you and say this was where we came from. Questions about that?
Is this a list that has taken out some of the things that we did do last year?
No, I didn't modify
Okay,
it at all.
so
It's in the same format as the last time we discussed it at United.
Gotcha.
So no, I didn't. If
I just-
something was done, it's still in there.
Okay. I just noticed that and was wondering if
No,
that was.
it hasn't been modified.
And then if things go well, we can always send out and find out if there are things that need to be modified differently
Right.
than what we were looking at last year as well. I think this was really good information for everybody, though.
Okay, any other comments or questions on that particular item? Okay, I want to skip flex time because that will probably be the longest discussion. You had we'll come back to that. All of you, I believe I sent, I hope I sent this to everybody, something that Lori Whitham had given me about proposal for extra duty for sped teachers. Did I send that to you guys?
Yep.
Okay, good. This was came to me after I'd already sent you the packet of other things, so this is just an additional thing to look at. I don't really know that we'll deal with it tonight. I just wanted to get it in your hands, let you know that it should be added to the packet of other things that were requested in terms of extra duty. The one thing that I would like to comment on this, I'm not saying that it's not a worthy endeavor. I would be hesitant to put it into extra duty because the things that are on here are a part of the normal everyday duties of special ed teachers. So putting it on the extra duty schedule to me would maybe not be appropriate. Doesn't mean that we couldn't say, you know, if you teach special ed, there's an X amount of dollar emolument that you receive additional, but I'm not sure that the extra duty schedule would be the place for it. You know, if you compare that to something like I sponsor National Honor Society, that takes place after school. It is an additional duty to your regular contract, where the, you know, keeping track of IEP paperwork and all the tons of paperwork that go along with special ed, that's their regular job. So,
But a lot of that is done afterward.
Yes, it is.
yeah, but,
And
you know,
when you are switching programs and you can't have a paraprofessional do clerical work of copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, and paste that takes an hour, sometimes an hour plus per IEP, and it has to be the certificated teacher doing it. I mean, there are just some demands in the SPED world, plus they are fully responsible for the curriculum that every other classroom teacher is, plus, you know, all the modifications. I've lived that world, and even with 100 kids in comm arts, I would not want to go back to that world.
Yeah.
And we're struggling, I am seeing, and Kelly can vouch for this, even in our own building, the last few years, we're struggling to hire adequately trained special ed teachers. We are getting trained teachers that then have to be tutored and trained for the demands of SPED.
yeah.
So,
That's not just St. Joe.
no,
That's everywhere. That's not just the
everywhere.
St. Joe School
Yeah.
District.
Yeah.
That's
The
everywhere.
burnout rate for SPED teachers is significantly high. Oh,
And like I said, Lori, I'm
No.
not debating that it's not a
Right.
worthy thing to look at. I would just question where we place it, maybe, but that's a discussion for another day. So add
Yeah.
that to your list of
yeah.
Other-
No, I
suggestions.
didn't know where else to put that in, but I think it is a worthy conversation at some point.
Right. Okay, any other comments on that? All right, the two that were added, and we will have plenty of time to get to flex time. We are flying here. This is going to be the shortest meeting ever. 260 calendar concerning the parent-teacher conference week. So Eric, go ahead and give us a synopsis of your concern, if you would.
Yes. It had been brought up to me and another member of our team here, Julie, from building level 260-day secretaries that they were unaware and unsure of what to expect for next week when we have parent-teacher conferences. Because in past years, they had, just like the rest of the 9-month secretarial staff, they did not come into school on that Friday because they worked their evening hours, which gave them that 40-hour work week, or whatever our number is for that, the full-time work week. But this year, based on the calendar that we have for this year, they are scheduled, so to speak, on that Friday, the 20th, to work, but are also being required to come in the evening, which actually gives them over the full-time work week. So since that has been brought up to me, I thought that this was a great opportunity for us to have this discussion with our secretarial and the individuals who represent those people, to bring up that discussion for this calendar that has not been approved yet for the 2018-19 school year, to see if those individuals are required, and this only affects high school secretaries.
High school administrators.
11.
High school administrators and high school secretaries, but they're not, administrators are not hourly. So the only hourly paid employees that it affects, or to my knowledge, are the high school secretaries. And so the question is, should we look at this and decide if those individuals are going to be required to attend the parent-teacher conferences, should they also be able, like, should we also not have them work on that Friday? The consensus appears to be right now that those individuals would rather, if they have to be there for parent-teacher conferences, they've got their full week, let me have the Friday off. Because I've worked my full hours. I've worked all my hours for that week. And Julie, can you pipe in and tell me any more?
It would like affect, there's 11 people it would affect. So then if they are to work that additional Friday, we as a district would be paying them time and a half. And so again, you know, we wouldn't be.
Well, for some of the hours, one
Right,
they got above 40.
Right,
Yeah.
anything above 40, so 2.5 hours, they're gonna be, but it doesn't seem to be fiscally responsible either to pay them that when, I don't know, there's just a lot. It's just, the one thing I do know is the block calendar, they did not, we've never seen that until Jenny Powers sent it out just this last week. And that's when I was like, oh, that's not what I had understood. I thought we had a conversation in here, then another person said they had talked with someone else and understood it to be, that was a 12-month employee, understood we were working parent-teacher conferences, we weren't working Friday. So somehow it got confused.
Let me ask a few questions here to get more information. If I heard you right, Julie, there are 11 260 secretaries at this.
I believe there's.
That's all. That's a total from all three buildings.
Yes, from all 3 buildings, and I don't know about the other, but from Benton and Lafayette each have 3, and then there's.
Well, there are no 260s at anywhere but the high schools.
Okay.
Secretaries. Paul. Hilliard's.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about Hilliard's, I don't know.
No, that might be.
Paul, from your perspective as an administrator, are all of the secretaries needed for parent-teacher conferences?
A lot of them are passing out. I mean, I would say yes
They
because
pass out at this?
They might. Like I think you have certain people passing out grade cards, certain information's going out, and stuff like there's different check-in points and stuff like that. I mean, I know that I can think about Central and how it was set up at Lafayette. I don't know how it'll be run now, but I can think of everyone being spaced out kind of they're kind of the first face you see. A lot of times they kind of are set out in front of everyone.
Yeah, well, I just didn't know if
To
if
kind
all
of
of
point
them were
everyone in the
naked.
directions and where to go and certain info. I mean, there'll probably be things with attendance, passed out, even Strife 5 info. There'll be the grade cards. There'll be all that stuff. So it's, and then there's other clerical things going on. So
you do think all of the 260 people would be needed for both nights at the
it sure seems like they're always doing something.
What, I would ask, what's the ballpark financial impact we're talking here? 11 people times how many hours times what average wage? Do we have a number? Ballpark?
Well, it'd be 11 people time. What are the official hours of the?
How many extra hours do you think, estimate that they would be putting in that week if they did that double
Parent-teacher conferences would be 6
duty?
extra hours,
6
correct? Because it's 3 hours a night,
Okay, so 6
essentially.
hours times 11 people is 66, and take another 2/3 of that for the overtime. So you're talking about roughly 100 hours at $15. We're talking about $1,500 to $1,700 probably
Per night
total.
Total.
for the 2 nights?
Yeah, because it's 6
Oh,
hours
yeah,
total.
sorry, excuse me, yeah.
What's the purpose of them having to work the Friday though, when nobody's in the building?
Well, I think from my understanding, I've heard a lot of feedback that we are overworked, we never have time to get our jobs done, that on a Friday when there are no kids, therefore tons less interruptions, that's a great day to catch up with your work. How many less interruptions will you have when there are no kids there, Julie?
Amazing. I mean, that's what people, anyway.
That's, I guess, the reason why I
It's like,
quantify it. I mean, that may be money well spent. And if we take that away, there's a process efficiency and effectiveness that you may be taking away from people that they could probably use that time really well. I'm just
If they
putting that out
want-
there on the flip
I
side.
don't know of one person wanting to work it that I've talked to in the 3 high school buildings.
So this is basically a question, they don't want to work and they just as soon have it all.
They're wanting, yeah, they want
Okay.
to.
I'm just put it out there on the table.
They don't wanna work conferences or they don't wanna
No,
work the Friday?
the Friday after.
Well, after conferences, everybody is.
Everybody's
Right.
exhausted after
Completely exhausted.
conferences. There's a lot of prep work before conferences that they do. It's just
Dr. New York,
a
did you have
long
something?
week.
There was an email that was sent out today to the high school building principals and Hilliard Tech for next week. Just because it's already been approved, this is the work calendar, Friday is a work day. The overtime, over 40 or anything over 37 and a half, would be paid for the parent-teacher conferences. Understand, it's not necessarily that they have to work the parent-teacher conferences. Am I correct on that, Brian Kraus?
Yep.
It's asking an employee to work additional hours above and beyond what they're, really contracted or letter of intent for. Now, we appreciate people putting in the time to get the job done and compensating for that. But I think, Eric, if I'm understanding you right, you're really wanting to talk about this for 18-19.
At this point, with this venue, I feel like that's the appropriate,
Correct. I would
that's the
agree- I would
appropriate
agree
way
with
to look
that.
at it.
And if they want to remain on the 260 calendar, okay, when would they make up their 7.5 hours? Because you're only talking 6. So if you did it the other way, okay, that would count as 6 hours towards your 7.5. So you're 1.5 hours short here.
But on that parent-teacher conference week, they're
They don't
usually already over they've already got their 7 hours because they're working, they're getting their papers ready, they're running grade cards.
So like if they're normal
Like
day,
I run bills and stuff like that, so I can do the bills at, I don't know, there's usually,
so if their normal day is ends at 4 o'clock, say, and parent-teacher conferences didn't start till when?
Some of them, ours is this year starting at 4,
4 to 7.
starting at 4 to 7.
I was gonna say, a lot of them are
Okay.
4 to 7.
They all are.
So they would just, really, you're continuing on.
Yeah, my calendar.
What time?
You know, for this year, I feel like the calendar's been board approved, I feel like we need to follow it. Now, what options people would have, from my perspective, hopefully if the administrators feel like they need them for parent-teacher conferences, hopefully they'll come. The options for Friday would be, if they want to take a personal day, they could get paid for Friday as well. If they want to take a dock day, which to me is not the best solution, but they could do that if they wanted because they already have their hours. They would need to pre-approve that with their principal, which I think they could do in most cases. Paul, would you say? And also they, as 260 staff, they also have vacation. They could take a vacation day. So they have 2 options to get paid, vacation or personal. If they want to take a dock day because they've already worked their full hours and they just would rather be off, that's an option too, that they would go to their administrator and say, hey, I'd like to take a dock day. For next year, I spoke to my good pal Wes about this. If you guys don't know, Wes is a genius. He comes up with the best things. And this is just something for us to think about. We could make it a situation where we handled the 2 weeks of parent-teacher conferences like we do the summer weeks. For 260 employees, make them potentially 4-day work weeks where they would have to work all their hours Monday through Thursday, and then everybody would be off on Friday. That would give an October and a March day to kind of,
honestly, I think most people would go for that because they work that anyway, a parent-teacher conference meetings. Those are long days.
yep.
But
My-
that's a good idea. Good job, Wes.
That is a good idea. Kudos to
We're
you.
good for Wes. That's
my-
kind of a golf clap.
Yeah.
My question on that is, if we do it like that, which makes a lot of sense, does that mean that it's still only gonna be those 2 days that they're making up, that they're doing that extra time, or is it every single day they're gonna be doing like 10-hour days or whatever?
10-hour days, those 4 days, right?
Then how will they be there for the entire time on the 2 days of parent-teacher conferences?
Well, they wouldn't be doing 10-hour days because they would have,
They have
They're
those
30,
extra
they're
three
37 and a half
for
hour
those
employees.
two
Okay,
days.
So they
37
would just have to do the math to figure it out,
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
what it was.
Yeah.
Well, I was just curious, because if 6 of those hours is in 2 days,
Right.
Basically,
Then-
in those 4 days, it would be like a flex week.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it would be. So as long as you worked your 37 and a half hours, or 40, some staff are on 40, in those 4 days, then everybody, the whole district would be basically shut down on that Friday.
I think that's a good.
Does anybody see any downside to that plan?
That's the way it used to be, right?
For par-
Well, no, with 12-month employees would still work. It's just,
No,
the
I-
custodians were working.
Custodians, the
You're leaving
entire
out
central
the
office.
central office. There's a lot of
Okay.
260 employees.
so this is going to, this affects literally the entire district, all 260-day
Well,
employees.
that's the discussion, whether we want to make it for everybody or not.
I
But
mean-
I think it would be less complicated if everybody was doing the same thing.
And since we already do it
Yeah.
in the summer, I was thinking, it'd just be a modification of the school
Right.
year, because we already have in place
Yeah,
of how we
the
do it in the
system
summer.
is
would
already
be
set up for
Similar
it.
setup, yes.
I think,
Yeah,
think
I can't imagine why that's a
those people
problem.
too, I mean,
Right.
custodian, all those people would appreciate just not having a day off.
I would think so.
I would think so, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like they're still getting all their hours, so there's no financial impact. But
And
yet they get-
custodians work along that night too, because
Yeah.
the teachers are in their rooms
And they
that
can't
week,
clean
that night.
until-
The teachers are in their
they
rooms, so they
can't
can't
clean
clean
until
till
later.
after, so.
I think it'd be a win-win for
I
everybody.
think so
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Still have activities going on.
On Fridays, yeah.
Yeah, you're still gonna have football games, you're still gonna have,
Right.
But that's, I mean.
but those
That's-
happen on the weekends and
yeah.
other times.
Well,
I
and
mean,
people that are
Over breaks and.
that are coaches for those things are receiving
But
an
the
extra duty for
custodians-
that.
The custodians would just have to
Ooh.
incorporate that into their time schedule.
Well, I think
That
that the
could be
custodians
a-
typically get pushed into overtime for activities anyway, don't they?
Okay, they do.
I think
think they
sure.
do.
I understand that. Rest.
And again, we're not talking about operations, they have to negotiate themselves. This is
Yeah, that's
just
true.
260 employees of the,
Yeah.
operations could do it if it comes out in their negotiations, but,
Yeah, that's a separate,
Separate talk.
yeah.
okay. So I didn't hear anybody say, yeah, I think that's a bad idea because, all right, so are we all on board with this year? The options would be, if you don't want to work Friday, you take a personal day, take vacation, take it unpaid. And if you want to take, well, vacation, you're supposed to ask your administrator anyway, so, to get the leave approved. Everybody good with that? Okay, and
Maybe a full day, since they have the extra 6 hours.
I wondered that
So
too.
on
But
Friday,
only
Wouldn't
an hour
they
and a half.
only have to
They
take an
wouldn't have
hour
to
and a half
take-
of leave?
No, it'd be a whole day.
Well,
They're required
So
to
then
be
they
here.
would still get paid overtime for those
Well,
6 hours?
If they-
remember, they're 260-day employees, so their pay is
Spread out, yeah.
spread out over that, assuming they're working a whole day there. So if, I guess they could take a partial leave day if they wanted. I mean, they could say, I want to be paid for 3 hours and the other 4.5 be unpaid.
Well, I was just thinking, since they're working the 6,
There's only an hour and a half.
there's only an hour and a half difference.
Yeah, but their day is a 7.5 hour day, so they'd have to work that
It's a
whole
done
day
deal
because
for this year.
it's
Yeah.
a scheduled day to work.
Yeah.
So they would have
Yeah.
to, so the other day, and again, if they take a leave day, there won't be any overtime. They'll just get paid straight time for those other hours, because overtime isn't calculated in for, leave time is not calculated in for overtime.
Yeah, and that's
Because it's
something you
actual-
need to make sure that you let
The
your
number
folks
of
know that when they
hours
have a,
actually
Worked is
right.
over 40 that we're required to pay time and a
Okay.
half. They would still get straight time for
I'll put that
those.
in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Read it.
well,
I
that
know
would
what
make
you're
a
saying.
difference, so.
Bold it and
Absolutely.
italicize it.
So, Dr. Kraus, we're really talking about allowing them to do flex time
No,
because it's,
Friday
if
is
they do a doc day on Friday, would that not be the same concept?
Friday is a full workday. So you throw the other stuff is all out, and their options on any workday are, you work it, you have an appropriate type of leave, or you take vacation.
Right. And that's why I think the dock day might not fit there, is what I was
Well,
thinking.
I mean, a person can always, I mean, if they run out of sick leave or vacation, they're in the same situation, they would be docked. You know, so, in a normal circumstance, I think because of the misunderstandings about this, I think we should allow them the opportunity to take a dock day. It's not anything I would recommend on a regular basis, if you want to.
So we're just saying the dock day, we're gonna do it for parent-teacher conference week, not something we would allow them to do normally.
No.
Is that, am I understanding that right?
Well, the principle of the dock day isn't it that
Situation
when
by
you're out of
situation.
employee leave,
Yeah.
right?
A dock day could happen anytime. If I want to keep my job, I'm not going to ask for too many
Okay.
unpaid days. Because the message that sends to my employer is, I'm not all that into this job. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you for the
So-
clarification.
yeah. Okay. Clear as mud for everyone? All right, so we're good with that. And then the 260 calendar, the 9-month one is the only one that we have to have done by a certain day because of we have to have the hearing and all that kind of thing. So I didn't hear anyone say, no, let's not pursue the weeks of this fall and spring parent-teacher conferences being 4-day work weeks for the 260 employees, correct? Okay. So we'll pass that on to the board as well, unless you guys feel like that needs to be a meet and confer topic.
Do you guys go?
I don't think so.
I feel like that's fine.
I think it's like.
For
I think it's
one
a
other
little-
question for this year, something that I heard and I want to just clarification on. When it comes to overtime, are they requested to come in to do the overtime? Are they required to come in to do overtime?
My opinion on that, and this is just my opinion, is that anytime we tell a person to work beyond ask a person to work beyond their normal day, it needs to be a request.
Okay.
Anybody, is that the way you would see that, Wes? Dr. Newhart?
I agree.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you for that clarification.
yeah. Anything else on this topic? All right. Employee handbook sign-off. Talk to us, Melissa.
All right, we had received a concern from multiple people as they were going through the handbook this year. In section 18, where you have to sign off, it says, because the district's operations may change, the contents of this employee handbook may be changed at any time with or without notice in an individual case or generally. And then you have to read where it says, I have received the instructions on locating the handbook. I understand I am responsible for becoming familiar with and complying with the policies. I understand that they are subject to change. I understand that the most recent version of this handbook will be posted on the district website, and I am responsible for being familiar with the most recent version. So the concern came that it can be changed and you don't have to tell us, but we have to know the most recent version. And most employees don't have time to go check every week on has something changed so the concern was, if you're wanting to be transparent, it should probably be, if something is changed, if it's important enough to be changed in our handbook, you should probably send communication to the staff.
We do that every time.
Then this wording probably needs to be taken care of, then that it will be changed with notice and not without. That you can change it without telling us, we have to know the most recent version. That's where the concern came out of.
Okay. Did you sign your contract this year?
I did sign my contract.
Okay, you signed basically that exact wording in your contract. Also in board policy, GBCB number 1 says you're to be familiar with and enforce all board policies, regulations, administrative procedures, other directions given by district administrators, and all state, federal, and local laws. It's out there. That's standard wording. I guess I'm having trouble figuring out why it's an issue.
Because that it can be changed without having to tell us, but then we're signing that we have to. And keep in mind, we're the messengers here. So
Yeah, I understand.
their concern was, you can change it and not have to tell us, but I have to know that you changed it and follow what you changed, but you didn't have to tell me you changed it. So the thought being, if we're wanting to be transparent and all work together, and I get that, yes, communication has been coming when things are changed, so I think it would help if it said, I have to know it, but I will be notified. I just think taking out without notice, I think would solve a lot of concern for people. That if it's important enough to change in our employee handbook, that communication would be given, that you would be notified.
Does the federal government notify you every time federal laws change? Does the state government notify you every time the state laws change?
Do we have to sign something that we're following as a citizen? Do I have to sign something that says I'm following every law with or without notice? No. Again, it was that we had to sign this, and again, we're representing people that have concerns, so please be kind. That if you're gonna change something and you're gonna tell us, then just change the wording to say, we will change it with notice. That was their biggest concern, that you can change it without notice. To me, that's an easy fix.
We're gonna notify you, I mean, and that's right, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. And we will communicate that, to the best of our abilities in getting it communicated. That's just common good employee relation practices.
I would agree, so, and that's what these people were saying. So therefore, then just take out without notice, and just leave it with being with notice.
Legally though, it's legally, we do not have to give notice is why it's in there. That's what it's saying. Is that?
I understand.
I understand what you're saying too, Melissa, but I guess I would like for us as a district to everybody get into the habit of, I know Bridget goes to a lot of work to make a board recap every month and send it out to all employees. Anything that's a policy or procedure is changed by board action. So if people take the time to look through what happened at every board meeting, they're going to know that's their notification of any action that the board has taken. I think that wording is fairly standard. As Dr. Newhart mentioned, it's because of the legal implication that we aren't required to notify. Do we choose to notify? Absolutely. I don't know, we could run that. Next time I see our school attorney, I'll ask him about that, if he would recommend that we make that change to say with notice and take the, or without.
Okay.
Out of there, I'll be sure and ask him. But just for all of you, for the constituency that you serve, if you would hammer people over the head with, that information is out there. It comes every month in the board recap. Every district employee has a school email. Now, do they look at it? Maybe not, but that's where the information comes. That's the chosen method that we have selected to disseminate information. So please tell your people, check your school email. You know, we're not acting in secret. Everything that's approved by the board is it's taped, it's public information, it comes out in a board recap. The information is there. People just have to make the effort to look at it.
It's on the website.
Yeah. Sorry, Melissa. You ended up getting beat up. My apologies.
You have to remember, we're the messengers.
And thank you for bringing every concern. I mean, I think that's what this table is. I mean, no matter how small it may seem, we all need to hear it. So I appreciate you bringing it.
And that affects every employee in the school district, whether they realized it when they signed that or not. They did, so.
Didn't we sign the same form last year?
Yeah.
Yes.
With the same
and-
exact wording?
Yes.
Beliefs.
And the concern that came to me from multiple people was that they had that concern last year. They didn't voice it, but this year they chose to voice it officially and want an answer. Our job then is to bring it and present it
Can
out.
we come to a conclusion?
No, we've got our favorite topic, flex time, yet to talk about.
Well, I was sitting here looking at the handbook policy, district policy. It basically speaks back to they're only going to change and approve it once a year anyway.
Yes, but in that time frame, we can always change a policy. Right now, we are going through on the maintenance and going literally through all policies. So each month, we are making changes to
handbook.
policies. No, to the policies. So if the policies change, then that may or may not affect the handbook.
No, I'm talking about the actual policy on handbooks.
We approve the official handbook
Right.
once a year, yes.
So the way this looks right here, you really can't change it until the next review cycle. You can't change it on the fly, which is her point.
Well, we do because the handbook, if you look at the handbook, there's a lot of links that link to the policies.
And the
So when the
policies-
policies are updated, the handbook automatically gets updated.
Right, and that's how the cross-references, I get it.
Oh, so you're saying the form itself, because it's in the handbook, we approve that one time a year.
So theoretically, it would be at that time, you're agreeing to the policies and procedures at that time, versus if you change it in a month, that person can't be.
No.
No. I think
You're
what he's
changing
saying
the
is-
policy reference in
Sounds
the
great.
handbook, but not
Well,
actually
no.
changing the handbook.
Yeah.
Right,
That's just where it
We're
gets.
Because what you're signing there says that I will
keep up with all
know
the
just
changes.
because I will know.
Changes, but if the policy in the handbook says, I'm just,
So policy
Says that
Well,
changes.
the
they
policy
approve it
technically
once.
trumps the handbook
Yeah.
anyway.
Right,
So if
and
the
you are
policy
being
says they
notified
can
of
only
that.
change it once a year,
Right.
they
Yeah.
can't technically change it.
that
Yeah,
sheet.
and they are pushing out notifications, so the without notice really doesn't have any standing. They're not gonna change the handbook per se, they're only changing policies as they pertain to the handbook.
right.
So you're covered, and I have to agree, the language, if it's standard language, is okay, because,
It's a safety net for
yeah,
the
it's,
district.
you're gonna, all those, any changes are gonna be pushed out anyway in regards to district policy. They have to do that. They're obliged to do that, so it's
They
one
don't
checks
have
the
to,
other.
that's where the thing was,
Well,
they don't
technically, yeah,
have.
they don't have to.
They don't have to, that's where this concern came from.
But
They don't
technically you do
have to tell
because
we
you.
You don't
always
have to
do.
notify everybody of
Board
policy
meetings
change?
have to
Are
be
public
public.
meetings.
Yes.
They don't have to tell you.
See,
That's where this concern
that's-
came from,
that's-
that they don't have to tell you, but you're
I
expected.
would not have,
But
if somebody told me
Michelle-
that, I would not have accepted it, so.
But they do have to tell us because board meetings have to be public information. And if policy is only changed during board meetings, then they have to notify, and that notification comes through Bridget.
Kind of happens by default.
That,
Right.
it does happen by default. Bridget does not have to send
Send those
us
out.
to
Yes.
us.
Right.
The
Yes.
district does have to make it public,
Yes.
but not necessarily send it to us.
And it's
So
like the
it is
minutes.
technically notifying the public, therefore we are the public, so technically the district's covered themselves.
And it just goes back to that thing, ignorance of the law does not excuse you from
Right.
breaking the law.
Right.
I get it.
So it just kind of,
Yes.
it's a
It's a-
free flow
Well,
exchange
and
and you're
frustrating,
covered.
though.
Yeah, and it's just like the minutes from this meeting. Bridget doesn't have to send that out to every single
Right.
employee that we have,
Right.
but that is the decision that we made that would best serve us.
Right.
And I think it falls back, I mean, when I worked for the juvenile office, laws change every single day. My chief juvenile officer didn't send me a thing saying, hey, this law changed this week. It was my responsibility as an employee of of that county or state to be able to know that something has been updated or something has been changed. That's part of any job, I think, with policies and procedures in any, doesn't have to be just a school district.
And every month, we have the whole list of them, and they can click on each one of them and see what the changes are.
I understand that. 'cause
I know.
We're in the weeds.
Okay. But I do appreciate you bringing it.
All right, flex time. Who wants to flex for us?
Yeah, here to pump.
Julie, tell us what the concerns are from your group.
Okay, so I'm
Give us
just
a
going to
synthesis.
read the email that I received, just so, because she worded it nicely. Let me get these on. Okay, here's an example. Her daughter's on the cross-country team at school. When she has meets, sometimes she needs to leave a little early, say half an hour. Most of the time in her position, she's already worked over 7.5-hour days that week. Now, instead of being able to use some of that time that I've already worked over, I have to use a minimum of an hour of vacation time. So on top of that, I'm now gone a full hour instead of the half hour that I would have been out at the office using my flex time. And this person didn't want to be gone an hour. They wanted, it just, their point was, I'm having to take a little more time. If I could just use their exact example was Monday, Tuesday, they worked late, they had the track meet Thursday, only need to be gone half an hour. They already had 2 hours worked over. Can't we just, within a week or within a pay period, flux that and not have to dig into vacation time and not go crazy, not have a comp time and not go crazy and back where we didn't want to be, but maybe just, is there a leeway on a few hours here and there within the week or within the pay period? That's the question.
I had the same question.
I was gonna say, I have the same issue for me personally, because I worked an hour and a half in a parent meeting after work. I don't get to clock in for that period of time. And I did a detention with a kid for an hour because administration needed me to do a detention with a kid for an hour. But then I needed to leave 2 hours early for my daughter's district softball game. And I in turn had to turn around and do, there's no compensation for that 2.5 hours that I just worked, but I had to take off 2 hours for my daughter's district softball game.
Okay.
Same thing.
The first thing that alarms me that I want to correct for you is if you're doing work, you clock in. It doesn't matter
I've
if
been
it's.
told that.
Are you hourly?
I'm not hourly.
You're a salaried
Oh,
employee.
I'm sorry.
I'm a salaried
Right.
employee of
Yep.
the social
That-
worker.
My bad, I thought you were still paid hourly. Okay.
And the same thing, teachers, like yesterday I had to cover a classroom. I'm not a certified staff, which number one, I'm not supposed to be covering a classroom, but it happens, it is what it is. Teachers, when they have to cover a class because we don't have a sub or because something's happened, they get to clock in for that time frame. But then people that are in our positions don't get that same benefit whenever we're having to do those types of things. So it's the same.
Any reason she shouldn't be clocking
I was gonna say, I would think if you're covering
Yeah,
that, you
if
should,
you're
just like a
covering a
teacher.
class, you clock in just like.
She's gotta have a sub certificate.
Which I do.
If she's got a
She
sub
does.
certificate,
Which I
you
do.
would get paid as a salary, she should be. I don't know why they're not allowing her, if she has a sub certificate.
I
Yeah,
don't necessarily know that it's not allowing, I think people don't know. We don't know.
tell them.
Yeah,
They have a sub certificate.
Yeah,
Anytime they cover a class, they.
What about for classified?
you have to have a sub certificate in order for the
I do.
attendance to,
Then you.
well, but you're an hourly employee, you're already getting paid per hour.
We're double clocking in.
So then you're getting paid double. Whereas
As a
with a
salaried
salaried employee, it's a little bit different.
Say, because last year they had us clock.
Well, I remember we had this conversation last year. You still could clock in, but the sub rate would be less than your normal
Yeah,
rate
so
in
we
an
took
SSU.
30-minute comp time passes.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be.
So, just to clarify, if we are not a certified staff, or, I mean, anybody who is working past, like my time is 3:25, if I'm working past an hour, then I should be clocking in during that time.
No, I said that
Okay.
based on my thought that you were an hourly
Okay.
employee.
then-
Salaried employee, if you work 18 hours, well, thank you very much for that extra time you gave us. You know,
But that's, I mean, but in the past, I've been able to flex that out within the week or within the month to be able to accommodate that.
do you guys know kind of how flex time was being abused? I mean, everybody's aware of that, are you not? We had employees who would work extra Monday through Thursday and never come in on Friday. We had people who would, with comp time, we had people who would work 60 hours for a few weeks so they could take several weeks off with vacation. There were too many people who were abusing it, and so that's why we opted to rein it in. I'm not saying that there can't be some give with flex time. It would have to be very intricately worded so that there was no gray area, because people, if there's potential for abuse, people will abuse it. I mean, it's just that simple. So I don't think anybody on the mini board is opposed to looking at a recommendation, a proposal for how to deal with flex time, but I can guarantee, I don't think there's, at the board level, any real interest in going back to where we were with just unlimited flex time, unlimited comp time, any of that. That was abused to death.
I
So,
think in our discussions, I think that it need to be very limited.
You know, with your soccer example, if, you know, soccer games are scheduled in advance, if I know I have a soccer game, and this is just my personal opinion, no one else's, so if I know I need to leave an hour early on Tuesday, I don't see any as big a problem with that person coming in an hour early on Tuesday so they can leave an hour early.
And I think that's kind of tricky.
But if it's, you know, I'm gonna work
As far as
extra.
we're understanding, there's no flexibility.
Right now,
Right now, there's
Right,
not.
and that's,
Yeah.
that's.
And I don't know what you guys are calling flex. We have, all we have is sick days.
Right.
Flex is technically anything beyond or outside of your normal work schedule. Longer, like if you're supposed to work 7 to 3 and you work 7 to 3:30, well, that 30 minutes is outside of your work day, so that you're then saying, well, I want to come in the next day at 7:30 instead of 7. That would be flexing your schedule.
But like ours, we had a girl that had her 7.5 for the day, or, you know, every day. She'd bet her hours for the week. She needed to take off 1 hour to take her daughter to the doctor on Friday, and she had to use sick time, even though she had already met her 37.5 hours for the week.
Yeah. I guess in that situation, Jamie, what damage was there to the employee by having to take a sick hour?
Nothing, she just didn't want to have to use it if she didn't have to yet. You know what I mean? She didn't want to have to.
Right, but that's the purpose of sick leave, is when you have a doctor's appointment.
Exactly. I understand that too.
Yeah, and especially with you guys, I mean, your bus routes are at certain times. You can't say, well, I'm gonna start the bus route an hour late.
That wouldn't work.
There's no flexibility in
There's no
that.
flexibility in ours.
Yeah,
So could the proposal then be that it has to be within the same day? You could work early, come in early and work.
Well, but then that doesn't get like that week, like her situation. She had to use, she was only gonna be gone 30 minutes. And she
Why
had
did
to
she have to
actually
take an
be
hour?
gone an hour.
So that's what I'm
That's the
saying.
minimum.
Oh, that's the minimum.
So that's what
So
I'm
like within
saying.
a week.
But so that's what I'm saying, Julie, is on that day, if she knew she had to leave a half an hour early, she would just have come in half an hour early that day and have it in that same day.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, it covers.
But some people have kids and can't get here in half an hour early because school starts. And this person obviously has a child and they're trying to go to the game.
yeah.
So I mean, I don't know.
That's where it
I
gets
could do
sticky.
that, but-
There's a million different.
It's,
Well, and
million
is
different things
there
to consider.
possibly a way you could make that the, you know, I like the parameter of the week, you know, that you could use it in that week, but then there's like a parameter on the number of hours you could do, so you
Right.
don't have the people abusing the 8
so
hour.
they're not
like,
gone a whole day.
I'm gonna do the whole, I'm gonna skip Fridays because I just don't like
Because I
them.
think in the past, there's been situations where people would work over every day so they could come, either take a half a day on Friday or take a whole day on Friday. And they were using that flex time to do that, and I think that's abusing. But I think
Agreed.
that there's certain circumstances where we should have a bit of flexibility. I mean,
Now, for my clarification on this, are you speaking about hourly?
It is
Paid
hourly.
employee.
I gotta make sure and make that
Yes.
clear. Flex time only applies to hourly employees. If
Nobody
you're a
that's
salaried
salaried.
employee, you would not qualify for flex time. Because, and even, I wanna back up here on this flex time thing, on this hourly thing, you're gonna add a ton of work to all the supervisors. Because they're gonna have to check everybody's weeks to make sure that, if you're gonna set a limit, if you're gonna set, when you start narrowing this, that adds even more work to the administrators, and Paul could talk about this, because he's spending a lot of time tracking people down to make sure they put in their leave, and so when you start messing with the flex time, it's gonna cause a lot more extra work for the supervisors.
So I'm confused, if you're saying it's just hourly, it's in every year up until this year, my kids have played sports. Softball happens to start at 4 o'clock in the
All right.
afternoon.
I know, I had to
And
deal with the
so
same thing, yeah.
I mean, so luckily, this year we did something wonderful and went to the hours with, you know, your flex time, with your personal days and things like that, but in the years past, I've always just, if I knew I had, like, I always have worked registration and not ever gotten paid for that in the past. So we just flexed out my hours because I worked X amount of hours and knew this day I have to leave a half an hour early because the game was in Lee Summit or wherever it may be. That's the same thing, but now I can't do that.
The problem you're running into here with the salaried employees is, our largest group of salaried employees are who?
Teachers.
Teachers. If you allow teachers to flex all the time, you're not gonna have them in their classrooms. See, and that's, I'm not picking on you.
No,
By no means am I trying to pick on.
I'm just trying to understand.
I'm just trying, if you allow teachers to flex constantly, it's gonna take even more time away from the kids in the classroom. And that's kind of why we're at basically, there's just no flex time.
But was it the teachers who are using the flex, I feel like I mean, I might be speaking out of turn here, but, like, if I were to, as a salaried teacher, use flex time, it would be so perhaps I could leave right after the bell so I could get somewhere. I'm not going to be taking the time out of my own day. That's just, I think those teachers might not need to be working in the school district. Like,
And I feel the same way about that hourly I'm like, how does somebody take off a whole Friday? And why weren't
And catch
they,
your work.
why wasn't their
because
administrator
if I have an
saying,
appointment at
"Stop it"?
3:15 and my day is at till 3:20, like, I'm not gonna be out of my classroom if I leave at 2:50. I'm leaving my,
And we're not talking about 90% of the staff. 90% of the staff, it's the 5 to 10% of the staff that typically causes all the problems, and that's why there's so many rules. So
but
does
then
everybody
again,
get
like,
punished?
that-
Yes, everybody gets punished.
So here's another factor that you need we need to consider as we're considering forming certain regulations. In my mind, there's a difference between, I have 7 employees in my office. We don't have on a regular basis contact with kids. Some of my staff could probably work from midnight to 8 and nobody would ever know any difference because they just don't have the daily contact. Now, if your attendance secretary says, I want to flex my day and I'm not coming in till 9, that's going to cause a huge problem. So whether an employee has daily contact with kids or not might also need to be a part of the scenario, because like I said, my administrative assistant, if she came in earlier or stayed late, nobody's going to know. None of you would ever know. But if your attendance secretary did that, everybody's going to know.
Right.
So.
And absolutely, the building level administration should be in on that discussion. Like, that should never be somebody can just decide that morning, I'm not going in until 8 o'clock and I'll flex that hour later. That's not necessarily the way that should work.
Right.
It should be controlled. Also, it shouldn't be abused by both the district side and the employee side, but it should be consistent and enforced.
But that does sometimes put our building leaders in a bad spot when they're the ones that have to say it's okay or it's not. It puts them in a bad spot with their people sometimes.
It could, you're right.
And from an administrator's perspective, and I've had this brought to my attention, just concerns that it has driven, that there is a wedge that's kind of been driven a little further between administrator and teacher, because where the administrators, I think, are looking still for a little more clarification as to, is there a time to allow teachers when they need to get out or to do, if it's 15 minutes or if it's, something, or 30 minutes, that they can be okay with saying, go, run real quick, run to the post, reduce, so they have to go, and they're, because I had it really eloquently put to me by an administrator, not in the building, but just said, teachers are a profession where they are completing their tasks, their duties, their responsibilities as a professional, and sometimes those responsibilities are happening at 9 o'clock at night, and there's no way for it to ever be quantified, and when they need just that moment to get away, would they have to sign out for everything? And that's kind of the concerns. I know we've got administrators that have been called Hitler, they've been, all the names in the book, that they're feeling, that are starting to feel kind of that. I don't know, I guess I'm kind of a big harmony guy in the buildings. I kind of like, and I just don't want to see that divide where it is becoming where, no, you can't go, or no. So I think administrators are looking for a little more clarification of when, and it's our job to find the abusers, but gosh, there's that teacher that, which is, like we said, 90 or 95% of our teachers they're doing it right. They're busting their butts.
Probably 98.
I mean, when I go, probably 98. When I tour Liberty North, I go, dear God, what our teachers get out of our students for what they make and the facilities, it just blows me away. I mean, they do a phenomenal job. So I think as administrators, we're kind of looking for that road to not make, it's not a way to be buddy-buddy, it's not like that, but to cut breaks when they're, because we know that
Yeah,
they're
but-
handling their responsibilities, they're
You know,
handling
having
their.
to take an hour off to have, to be able to pick up my daughter because there's no one else to pick her up at a different school. You know what I mean?
mean,
I
it's-
think
it's some
that's-
stuff like
there are
that,
things
but-
like that where that, I don't think that's, I'm doing my job. I just have to, my kid has to be picked up. I'm not gonna leave her sitting by herself at a school.
So I don't know if there's any way to.
at night.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Going
Go
in
Guardian
early.
Phone
alerts at
calls
night.
to,
You know, I mean, it's
doing-
all of those things, we're all
Without
still working.
compensation,
Yeah.
right?
And if your goal is to retain quality employees, a lot of the intrinsic and little things like that make a difference when an employee makes a decision to go looking elsewhere.
And I don't think
I've
it's
seen it in the
typical.
private sector and I've seen
Yeah.
it now in the public sector. And yeah, you gotta draw a line somewhere. And but you gotta hold people accountable and you gotta hold the supervisors accountable for administrating any program that you put out there correctly. And if they don't, then they need to be counseled and they need to be.
Oh, and if I'm an administrator who lets it be the Wild West where everyone just, then I need to be brought in and
Exactly.
told.
Had a talking to.
Responsibility moves up the ladder.
But if, you know, sometimes cutting that teacher that break when they need it, then you get it back tenfold in your building, I mean.
Right.
So I think that's where administrators are, that have come to me with stuff is.
That
just
discretionary
concerned-
kindness pays dividends.
Yeah, I think that's where,
I,
if I ask them, you know, I mean, we're in a tough time, we're in a hard time, morale needs to stay awesomely good right now, I mean, because we are fighting all together and we're all doing our jobs and.
you know, it's really, really wonderful to hear that the administration in the buildings is having that concern.
Yeah.
Because it tells me that the administrators that are in our buildings are really, they really care about the climate of our buildings.
And are
And
tuned,
that-
and tuned into.
And they're tuned in to what we're feeling
And this is at
as
this is at all levels,
professionals.
it's not that are
And,
expressed.
and so that really makes me feel good that you have heard that concern from many of your administrators. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really great opportunity for us to have a discussion about what we can do as we move into the next school year in terms of that just professional courtesy.
But I like
if
what you
you will.
said, you know, if you leave too much gray, then it
And you can't,
can
no.
be abused, so that's where you're,
And-
and that's why I think Dr. Kraus has really come in to set a lot of good standards for us for where we needed to be,
Yeah.
but, you know.
But I
That
think what
pendulum
you're speaking-
swings
Yeah, well, I think what you're speaking
ways.
of is that we're creating a good culture and climate in our buildings between all of our staff. So,
Yep.
I mean, we have to be mindful of that because
Right,
morale is very fragile.
right.
Well, and the bottom line is that cross-country meets, softball games, whatever it is, picking your kid up after school, those are us being good parents. And that is a lacking thing that we have in our district, is families that have parents that are willing to go do those things, that are there at those things, that are picking their kids up. You know, how many of us have had to stay after because we're waiting on a family to come pick up their kids? You know, we're trying to do those things for our own families and, you know, bring children into our district that are, you know, productive and doing the things that we expect our kids to do in our schools. If we're not able to do that, then that's harmful to our families. You know, I don't want my kid being the only person who doesn't have a parent sitting in the stands for her softball game because we work for her dad and I work for the St. Joe School District. You know what I mean? Like it's just not, it's not feasible and it's not an option for me. You know, I will do whatever I have to do. But at the same time, I just think there needs to be a balance and that there should be some compensation for the fact that people, I mean.
And let's just say you have a teacher who needs to take an hour, but they're supposed to take an hour, but they're either covered or that's their off period or whatever, but we'll use it for your sick days. Well, if you say it's a single mom, I got 2-3 kids at home and that's their only time to, they're gonna use those anyway because kids get sick all the time, especially one in daycare. I mean, you know, they're always going down with something. So I don't know, just something to where we can do something, you know, where there's kind of a letter of the law, but a little bit of
There's a
flexibility.
human aspect
Yeah,
to
human,
the
yeah,
fact that
flexibility
there are
to it,
hours
so.
in the day.
Exactly.
Just something for us to think about.
It seems like, and this is common that we've been hearing, all of us have been hearing this since the beginning of school. It seems like, you know, that pendulum has swung from way loosey-goosey people in different buildings just got to do, in some cases, not all buildings, some were very strict, but some got to do kind of just whatever and it didn't really matter. And we've swung all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, and now let's try to find what's gonna work in the middle.
The happy medium.
Right. And sometimes it takes that far right swing to get people to realize, oh wow, there have to be limits. But now that we've, just like in our classroom, we establish those strict, hardcore guidelines and expectations at the beginning of the year, gives you some wiggle room to flex back towards the end of the year, you know, so people understand that there's boundaries, can't push it, but we also have, I love the way that you've said, the human aspect of it. So I think this is great.
Well, and I think this is a lot of good points made by all of you. There's no perfect policy everywhere, and no matter how perfect your policy is, there are still going to be people who try to test the limits. And unfortunately, you know, the reason we have laws is not for 98% of us, it's for the 2% that break it. And it's the same offenders percentage-wise probably in a school district. You know, we've got plenty of time to figure this out. Probably we would want to have something to meet and confer and to the board no later than probably March or April. So we've got 4 or 5 meetings. Our next meeting is going to be proportionally longer away because we're meeting early this month. So it's the third Thursday of November. If any of you would be interested in being part of a mini group to maybe try to craft some regulations for how we might change flex time, email me and I'll collect names and we put together maybe a kind of a subcommittee that would want to look at that. But no, there's obviously, you know, the pendulum thing is a good example. You can be too far in either direction. And so we'll definitely look at things that can be done to make it more user-friendly while still maintaining the order that we have to have, you know, to run the district efficiently. So, any other discussion on this? Like I said, it's 5 weeks till our next meeting, so if you have agenda items, email me. We'll have a much better sense of direction next time we meet in terms of whether we have new resources or not. And that will kind of, I'll wait to send out any agenda until after that so I can fine-tune that a little in terms of topics too.
I have a quick open item that just popped up if I can
Sure.
have grace. Eric and I pushed out on the little video we made together, but with the canvassing opportunities, there will be coupons available for a week of jeans. I think there's more information be coming out to administrators that if you have a teacher that shows up with this, and that's what that's about, but, you know, push that out, share. Y'all come, week of jeans day.
Could we do yoga pants?
It said jeans.
No,
It said jeans.
no. It say jeans, right?
It did say jeans.
No. Take that off the table.
Next meeting's at
Oh, yep. Yes. Unless you, hopefully you heard Amy, the next meeting's at TMC.
That's right.
At the same time, but yeah, TMC.
It's the third Thursday, right?
Great.
Third Thursday. Anything else before we dismiss?
There's a board meeting at Carden Park.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We'll see you next month. Email me if you want to be a part of the crafting something for Flex.